Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome. And while we're doing this over the internet, which is fantastic, we can still do these things in the today's environment. I'm going to pretend in my own mind that we're all together in a beautiful venue. I'm just envisioning, the Pacific Ocean maybe, and cliffs, and just beautiful venue just outside the window, and we're in a wonderful hall where there's a great stage, and Olfa and Kelsey and I are up on stage together doing this panel discussion, and all of you fantastic folks are out in the audience ready to learn, and then also ask us some great questions towards the end of the session. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So as you may have seen in the materials for this session, we're going to be talking about Lean Ipd and Advanced Work Packaging, or AWP, and we're going to talk about how they may actually work together and be complementary for organizations in delivering complex construction projects and capital projects around the globe. So as we started talking, we realized that many organizations are making the decision to invest in Lean Ipd, which is Integrated Project Delivery, and or Advanced Work Packaging, or AWP. And so in this webinar, Kelsey Henderson, who's president of my company, Continuum Advisory Group, and Olfa Hamdi, CEO of Concord Project Technologies Incorporated, are going to compare and contrast these popular project planning and delivery methodologies. So really excited for this conversation. My name's Clark Ellis. I'm a principal and founding member of Continuum Advisory Group. We are a consultancy that focuses in the construction space on construction industry stakeholders, helping them be more effective. Kelsey is our president and also one of the original founders of Continuum. She's played a key role in transforming the industry through revolutionary innovation. And as president of our firm, she works with capital asset owners, utilities, contractors, engineering firms, building material and product suppliers, home builders, and construction industry associations. Her specialties are strategic planning and the development of lean and integrated teams. She supports clients such as General Motors and Procter & Gamble, and she's very passionate about collaborative culture development and implementation. Olfa, our other presenter, is an international entrepreneur and thought leader in the construction industry. She co-invented the Advanced Work Packaging System and founded the AWP, or Advanced Work Packaging Institute. Her work on AWP was so important to the U.S. and international construction industries that Olfa was able to immigrate to the U.S. under America's prestigious Einstein visa program, which is limited to individuals that demonstrate extraordinary ability in their field. So I feel very lucky to be part of this group, and I'm excited about hearing from them on this incredibly interesting subject. So I'm going to turn over to first Kelsey and Olfa to give us a little bit more background on themselves, and then we'll get started. Kelsey?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Henderson, as Clark said, president and one of the founding members of Continuum Advisory Group. And we are a management consulting firm that works exclusively with the stakeholders of the building and construction industry. And as Clark mentioned, all the way from large owners and major contractors to engineering firms to unions and industry associations. And our services include kind of a range of things from acquisition strategy and growth strategy and analysis to change management, process improvement, and building high-performing teams. And personally, I spent a lot of my time in recent years in the high-performing team side of things, working both with organizations and with project teams on the implementation of lean construction and integrated project delivery. And as we've gotten to know Olfa and others in the AWP space, we've really recognized, how much alignment there are between these methodologies and how we may be able to find a way that they could work together to be more effective. So I'm really excited to be here and happy to be talking to you guys about this today.
Great.
Olfa?
Thanks, Kelsey. And Olfa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you both, and thank you to everybody attending here today. This is, as a venue, it's part of those great conversations that we could do to help advance our industry, right? That's how we change and improve our industry. A little bit of background about myself. So I was very, very lucky to be part of the research team that invented advanced work packaging at CII and COA, the Construction Industry Institute and the Construction Owners Association of Alberta. I did that when I was doing my research and thesis at the University of Texas at Austin. And then after I finished that, I worked as an auditor of large, small, mega projects with independent project analysis, IPA. And that has given me the incredible chance to understand project risks and what actually impacts project performance. While doing that, I was actually, I continued the research on advanced work packaging as the primary thing I really started with in this industry with the AWP Institute as a research nonprofit organization. And then after that, there was, I've seen that the industry can make AWP a standard, and AWP has the potential to actually advance our industry at a macro level to better performance. And so that's when I co-founded Concord Project Technologies, which is a consulting, training, and technology company specialized in predictable project delivery. So we help, our vision is that 100% of our clients deliver their projects on time and on budget. And so it's quite an ambitious vision for the industry, right? Knowing how we are, but that drives everything we do. So since its founding, the company is about 4 years old now. We have helped owner companies, major owner companies in the petrochemical industry, but also in other industries as well, EPCs and subcontractor companies implement AWP. And we've recently launched an AWP and Workface Planning certification program, which is all virtual, all self-paced, including a lot of the learnings and the how-to practices for implementing advanced work packaging. And I'd like to say that's, when it comes to Lean and its implementation, I came across Lean actually when I was at UT, right? So you don't study project management without studying Lean, right? And I got introduced to it when one of my advisors, told me, you gotta read the book, The Machine That Changed the World. And then since then, have paid a lot of, attention and interest to it. And the truth of the matter is that there are certain principles within Lean construction that do interact very well with AWP, and we have used them. And so really looking forward to this conversation and just either starting the debate or just maybe concluding it today, part of this conversation. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Olfa and Kelsey, for the background. And I think as we get into it, I'd like to understand a little bit more about how each of you really got introduced into these disciplines, Lean Ipd for Kelsey and AWP, for Olfa. So maybe Kelsey kind of start, give us just a real quick background on how you got introduced to Lean and Ipd.
Yeah, so I always kind of joke that I came to Lean construction kind of through the back door of really focusing on working with building integrated and high-performing teams. And so Continuum Advisory Group and our partners, we have a long history of working with clients on integrated team performance. Some of that with some of our partners dating back to the 90s and working on partnering. Our focus has obviously shifted and changed over the years, but several years ago, we were working with a client who wanted to be able to learn and kind of share knowledge and create some efficiency across multiple different projects. And so we were brought in to help build an integrated program team. And at the same time, that team was also really interested in, and they were exploring some different Lean construction tools and practices. So we were kind of along for that journey with them. And really quickly started to see, how well the components of building an internal or integrated project team and then the approaches of Lean construction really complement each other and seem to work well together. As a result, we began exploring Lean construction further and building those practices into our services, working with high-performing teams. And then it's really become sort of a joint effort at this point, whether it's Lean Ipd or whether we don't have that actual contractual agreement, but it's Lean and building integrated teams. Everything that we bring to that offering and that service really is founded in the roots of integrated teams, building collaborative and aligned culture. And focusing on, creating a team that works more efficiently with one another.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. And I kind of resemble some of those examples that you gave, going back to the 90s. I think it's clear.
Yeah, it was definitely. It wasn't me who was consulting on it in the 90s.
No, it wasn't. Excellent. So Olfa, talk to us a little bit about. I know you were part of the research team at CII that invented AWP, but how did you get there and then get to this point?
Well, I'll talk about two aspects of that. So where the industry has done AWP and a little bit of its history and how I got into it. So basically, it all started when, in some of the oil and gas projects in Western Canada, where the whole idea of adding more planners in the field to be able to produce ready to install packages for labor has increased productivity in the field. When we talk about productivity, we talk about the time spent by labor on tools versus all of the other activities that are considered waste if we take the lean approach into that. At the time, that was around 2006, that practice was labeled workplace planning, and it was considered as a best practice by COA. But here's the thing, by the time I joined UT, at the University of Texas at Austin, there was already an understanding or a qualitative understanding in the industry that when it comes to workplace planning, the process itself is limited by the issues we inherit from the office. We inherit from definition, from engineering, from procurement, from all sorts of things. And so that's what triggered the whole research team, which included a number of corporations really that funded that research team to be able to figure out the advanced part in the work packaging process. So what happens early on and how can we improve that? And so I was the research graduate student actually from the University of Texas, doing all of the case studies, the research, the interviews, what graduate students do, right?
Do the real work.
Yeah, so I learned a lot, but you do some of the heavy lifting, but the advantage to that is that you learn a lot from these great people, members of the team. I mean, all of them, project managers, project leaders, procurement leaders. It was such an incredible exposure to the world of CAPR projects from these people, and so that's when, so workplace planning basically started early on. And then by the time I joined UT, that's when the joint venture was forming basically and was making progress between COA and CII. And I was at the center of it. And I think that was incredible because through that, I was able to publish my thesis on advanced work packaging and then take it from there and make something out of it. Actually, just a quick note. At the time, when you Google advanced work packaging, like when I was doing my thesis, so 2011, 13, 12, 13, the only thing that comes out in Google is paper packaging ads and paper packaging companies, okay? It was not. And so that's when I started like, okay, you know what? For this to grow, we need to publish about it, we need to write about it, we need to, take it out there. And it's been quite a journey, but I'm very proud of what AWP has accomplished so far, so.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Great stories. I always love to hear how great practitioners have gotten into the fields where they practice. It's always interesting and always a mix of obviously brilliance, but also focus and work. And then there's always a little bit of luck sprinkled in there. So I love to see how all that comes together, right?
You're in the right place at the right time with the right people, and you have the right environment, and that's something you love. And something happens,
Absolutely, but it's one of my favorite quotes too. Though is luck favors the prepared, and I think that you both are good examples of that. So, well, the title of the webinar today is choosing results over methodologies, which is a little strange because AWP and Lean Ipd really are methodologies, but we really want to focus on what's the actual point of doing these. And so, speaking of results, what are the objectives? Kelsey, of Lean Ipd, what are we trying to accomplish with Lean Ipd?
Yeah, so when you think about lean, and this could be, whether you're talking about like lean manufacturing, as in the Toyota production system, or lean construction, or even just general lean management, the main purpose of that lean philosophy is delivering more value for the customer. And we do that by optimizing resources and by eliminating waste. But really, that ultimate goal is delivering more value. And on the IPD side of things, integrated project delivery, it really aims to bring together a diverse group of people, of project stakeholders. You want to drive alignment around common goals, enable the transfer of knowledge, the information sharing, and we motivate folks toward optimal project outcomes through shared risk and shared rewards. So having a little bit of skin in the game, everybody kind of really working together so that we win together. And so if you kind of combine those two things and think about really what we're trying to do, I think ultimately, the desired outcomes are improving cost and schedule and quality, but we also aim to improve the project experience for all of the participants. So whether that means more profitability for, subcontractors and trade partners, it means, higher quality and better outcomes and more value for the owners. But then the experience of working together, learning from each other is such a key component of that. And, creating an environment where we want to continue working with each other and working in this way to achieve results.
Excellent, excellent. So Olfa, similarly, can you talk to us a little bit about what you try to accomplish with AWP? What are the objectives?
So, AWP acts on two key outcomes overall, and these are productivity and predictability. So when we talk about productivity, is labor productivity in the field. So we're really focused on how can we increase the on-tool time by labor, right? By the labor in the field. And it's an entire thinking, an entire logic to get to there. And predictability is basically trying to increase the accuracy of our plans and our actual delivery in terms of cost and schedule, right? Now, when we implemented AWP in the context of these capital project organizations, and you're never really starting from scratch, right? So you implement the system in an environment that is existing. So some projects with the right environment, some of those projects actually already use lean principles, which has, when you talk about value, so that logic is already there. When AWP gets introduced to act on productivity and predictability, we've actually realized that there are other benefits, other outcomes to it. One of them, which was not the intention in the beginning, but it ended up being an outcome, is actually improved safety. So lower recordable accidents. So AWP was not designed with the thinking of acting on safety, but when we did it wanting to improve productivity, we realized actually we improve safety. Other secondary objectives or outcomes of the system included, for example, lower changes, number of changes.
Right.
Included, better working relationship between the owner and the contractor or the various contracting companies, especially that keyword about relationship, which is important for a lot of framework contracts, for site-based projects, etc. So overall, I would say, and this is the researcher in me, right? So I'm not into sales mode. I'm more into always looking at things from that researcher. I could never get that hat out, but the productivity and predictability are the key things, and then depending on the context where you are, you end up having other benefits that come out of the system when implemented and improved. But I like the value word when it comes to lean and the customer experience, where customer experience or actually team experience. I think those two, I can see them with predictability and productivity. They're just complementary. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's nice to see. I know, since I started consulting in the industry in the 90s, we have shifted the culture. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but I can definitely, when I think back to my earlier days, we've really started to value customer experience, team experience, and realizing how much of an impact that has on the success of the project. So I think that's something that we've tended to look at as kind of a soft thing to measure, but I think we've gotten a lot smarter about realizing how much that impacts value and impacts the results. So great stuff, guys. So speaking of people, the construction industry is a people industry first and foremost. So any methodology that we try to deliver tends to succeed or fail in many ways based on whether people buy in and how they buy in the organization. So how do organizations build the capability either for Lean Ipd or for AWP, and what have you seen to be successful? Maybe start with Kelsey.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously developing those internal capabilities is key. It's really important to be able to build out and to grow a team. And we work with a lot of organizations. It's both owners and contractors on implementing Lean Ipd. And a key component of either of those programs really is developing a team of lean leaders. So they could be, lean coaches, lean champions, people use different terminology. But at the project level, we find that it really helps to have someone who's kind of a neutral third party, who's there separate from the project manager, but whose role is to help really develop the team's capabilities, to facilitate, lean training and workshops, to help coach the team through using the processes, and to kind of help keep all of those approaches and focuses forefront. And so, people in that role will also have like several touch points throughout a year. So they might have a number of different projects that they work with rather than being kind of dedicated to a single project at any given time. And it can also be a role that's filled by someone on the owner's team or someone from like one of the primary project partners, or, someone like us as a third-party consultant who comes in, which often, our clients will do as they're developing their own internal coaches and capabilities, is, bring in some outside help. Usually there's some sort of an internal education component that's established. So, once they kind of get a few projects underway, kind of get on their feet and have a few people who, start to become stronger coaches and champions, they might put a train the trainer process in place, for example. But definitely some organization around whatever that program is, and what you want to source from outside resources versus what capabilities you want to have in-house, and how you want to run that. But building those out for sure, absolutely one of the most important things when a company's getting started with Lean Ipd.
Excellent. And similarly, how do organizations build capability internally for AWP, Olfa?
So, AWP is a process first, right? So it's really about the scope of the project. How do you break it down? How do you build a path of construction? So that's a deliverable within the AWP system. And then how do you organize everybody to be able to deliver that process and execute that process in an efficient and productive way? And so that's when we get into the people side of things, right? So it's process and people. When we get to the people side of things, there are a number of ways to build the capability. So obviously, I would just say that the number one thing, whether you're an enterprise or a project team, doing this is training, training, training. And this is not limited to AWP, right? It's anything. Right. So if any change initiative, it's literally unfair for a project team or any company to implement something new without training their people. It's unfair to the people, right? So, and that's the challenge we tend to encounter with AWP. It's because it's quite intuitive in terms of the name of it. So everybody thinks, okay, advanced work packaging, we're building packages, let's get it done. That's not what it is. It's a standard process that comes with a standard methodology. The name is powerful and simple, but the process is not that simple. So that's the number one thing to start with. So training, as Kelsey mentioned, and it's the same thing, whether done, obviously through external parties, but we're Train the Trainers program. That's going to depend, of course, whether you're doing it on a project level or an enterprise level. But that is something that's important. The second aspect on the people side of things is, is actually for pilots specifically, right? So I'm talking here about early maturity, right? So you're piloting for the first time. These pilots, like you're planting a seed, they need special care, right? They need special care. So they need what we call an AWP champion. And that is somebody that is part of the project team and part of the company. The AWP champion cannot be an external person. It has to be somebody from the project team, because you're looking for somebody that is, an integrated part of the team, that is also part of the execution, that becomes the go-to person to be able to advance the implementation. Now, of course, that person, and that's where we actually intervene, is we built what we call a support or a predictability package. So that's a support package that comes with coaching and training and a support system, basically, so that the champion person or the championing team does its job implementing AWP successfully very well. And we do that at the project level, but also at the enterprise level. But as a key function really for AWP in the early stages is the AWP champion. And I think I'll tell you, if I look at companies and, we've helped at the project level, at the site level, and also at the enterprise level, it makes a difference who that champion is. And I'm gonna just maybe mention a challenge, because I always want people to think about the challenges. When you decide or choose somebody to be a champion for a new implementation, the AWP implementation, you need two things. You need the person to be genuinely interested and actually wanting to do it, so they're not forced to do it. And you need that person in their role. The AWP implementation needs to make sense for them from a career standpoint. So if he's a lead, let's say if he's a project engineer, and to be an AWP champion on a project, he could spend up to 80% of his time on just AWP stuff. Well, if his career is based on him on a career path, in the engineering side, and he's competing with the rest inside the company for advancing his career in a technical standpoint, not a managerial standpoint, it doesn't make sense for him. He's in a position of interest. So I would say the people side of things, the AWP champion is a key role in the implementation. Investing in that person or in that team championing AWP from a support, training, certification, coaching, right, is important, but also you need to choose the right people to do that. And that's a key success factor for for building capability.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we want to talk a little bit, continue this discussion really, and kind of talk about it more from an organizational perspective. But as I look back over my 20 plus years doing a lot of change management, in all kinds of different contexts, whether it's implementing a new software system, whether it's implementing a new strategy, making sure you've got those bases covered, and the person in that role, that internal role, of champion driving it. You really can't be successful without that role filled properly. So I think that's a great insight to start with, Olfa. So let's kind of think about it from the organizational perspective. We've talked about kind of building the capabilities. Now, how does an organization get started with Lean Ipd, Kelsey?
Yeah, I mean, from what we've seen, often it starts really small. We've worked with lots of organizations where it's literally been driven by one person or maybe a very small group of people who've got some motivating factor for change. And so, like on the owner side, that could be frustration with the status quo. They've got projects that are running over schedule and over budget, more often than not, and there's just a total lack of predictability, or there's concern or frustration with the contracting methodology that they're using, and after years of having projects where they have these same issues crop up over and over again, they start thinking there's got to be a better way to do this, right? So, or on the contractor side, often there's someone with a desire to kind of prove their organization's value, versus the competition. So, this way of doing business or way of running projects, it's a better way to do business and create value for the client, but it also improves profitability for partners. And, like I was talking about earlier, it's a more enjoyable working environment. So on the contractor side, it could be a sales executive even who's chasing a particular owner client, and that client's already bought into Lean. And so they realize, our organization needs to get on board. This is what's going to differentiate us from the competition, or these are the table stakes even. But regardless of what that motivating factor is, usually what we've seen is, that small start, there's, that individual or that small team, and they start to put together a plan for maybe trying out different approaches, and like Olfa was talking about, piloting, and starting small with that. It doesn't have to be something that happens overnight. It doesn't have to be sweeping change across the entire organization at once, but maybe starting small, having a few pilot projects before rolling it out to the rest of the organization, and that gives a chance for some trial and error, so for some practicing and time for people to learn and to hone the approach. But then most importantly, to start to get some momentum and some buy-in. And pretty much everybody that we've talked to or worked with that has participated in a project that's been run in a Lean Ipd environment, once they've done it, they don't want to go back to doing traditional projects. And so there's a little bit of a grassroots effort there too, where you get a few pilots that go well, and you start to share that information, and you generate excitement in the organization. And so then you've got people who are interested in what's going on, as opposed to just being told, hey, tomorrow everything goes this way. And to Olfa's point, without the training, without the support structure to back up that change. So I think starting small is always a good way to go. Definitely piloting, and leaving some room for error and for growth.
Yeah, I think, it's funny, as humans, we tend to learn better through stories, right? And so, if you think about the change, think about building the success story, for Lean Ipd or for AWP. And people want to be associated with success, right? And so it's, a lot of this getting started is kind of building the credibility, not just of the team, but of the initiative. So let me switch a little bit and give Olfa a chance to weigh in here on your perspective on how the organization begins to bring AWP into the process and how they operate.
So, depending on where the company is, so if it's an owner company, if it's an EPC, if it's an EP, if it's a contractor company, if it's a site-based, if it's a mega project, right? I mean, there are variations, right? But I would say there are certain steps that I think are standard for everybody. So, that's how I recommend it, and that's how we've been, Concord built its methodology on this. And we've tried it basically on, going basically horizontal. So we tried it on multiple types of scenarios and it works. So the number one thing is the company or the project needs to answer the question, why are you implementing AWP? Your why statement. So are you doing it as an owner? Am I doing it for productivity? Am I doing it for predictability? Am I doing that for more business? Some EPCs are doing it for more business. There's no issue with that. That's no problem, especially now owner companies are making AWP a contractual requirement on all of either contractual requirements or in the pre-qualifications process. So you know what? Business is an argument. So the question is, why are you doing it, right? So, and this question, to answer this question, sometimes the answer is quite obvious, right? So by gathering the right people or the right, having a consultation or an awareness or a discovery, what we call a discovery workshop, and that's basically, and getting trained into AWP and discussing the actual context of the company or the project or the site or the context, basically, you come up with the why statement. You understand as a company why you're doing it, right? So that's number one, and I'm a believer in that because I believe everybody has free will, even when you're working in a company and you're obligated to actually use a process. So if people don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, they resist change, right? So that's number one thing. The second aspect is understand the context in which you're implementing AWP. So let's say, we're implementing AWP for this particular reason. We get it. Now, where are we doing it? Right? What's the context? And that looks basically at the maturity assessment, right? So you want to look at your company, and I'll cite an example here. We work, for example, with an EPC company. I'll just cite an EPC company that's growing internationally, right? Well, it's going to get more and more projects in new regions, in new areas, and it's going to hire new people. And then by growing, basically, there is no culture of accountability inside the company as it grows. What I mean by that is that the basic roles and responsibilities and accountabilities in a project team are not formal, right? It's always, well, if you want to implement AWP, a work packaging process, which is meant to integrate multiple stakeholders to deliver common deliverables, and you don't have a base of a culture of accountability, and basically you use an RACI matrix in a systematic way for everybody, you're going to fail, right? And that's something you need to know as you enter into the implementation. You need to know what needs to be upgraded from a project management standpoint, basic project delivery capabilities, from a team standpoint, engineering, quality, workflows, all sorts of aspects, procurement, expediting. You need to understand where you stand on all of these, including the culture of accountability, so that when I'm implementing AWP, here are the upgrades that I need to do as well to succeed. Right. And I believe that's important because what we tell people is that when you're implementing something new, it's a change. It comes with a cost. You got to have a budget for your implementation. If you want to save, you know, for $100 million, you want to save $10 million, you know, on average, you got to spend $1 million, you know, just, you got to spend money to save money. Yeah, so that's the logic of it. So we say, you know, for companies to get started, consider your AWP implementation as a project by itself. So prepare for it, understand it, budget for it, you know, and prepare your people for it, and so that you can do it right. And I would say, you know, for the lean side versus, you know, the AWP side, I think for companies implementing AWP, there needs to be a coherent or an inherent understanding and a conviction by the numbers or the training or whatever, that as a business in the construction industry, we need people to help plan. We can't rely on a completely automated process that drives it.
Right.
That's just not reasonable, you know, So people are going to be needed, actual people, you know, that are going to be needed to plan, to clear constraints, to prepare packages. Obviously, technology will help them, but it's a people-driven process. And so that means people, that means staffing, that means decisions around staffing. And so these are some of the steps to be able to get started, is to be conscious and aware about all of these factors.
Yeah, I think those are great. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kelsey.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's, you know, very much the same with Lean Ipd, and to the point that you made about accountability and roles and responsibility, and really having more clarity around what the structure of the team is, and the value that those diverse participants bring, and why we bring them in the beginning. And it is, you know, overall, it's a change management initiative like anything else that we might want to implement. There is a cost associated with it. You know, that is it's a project to be undertaken separately from the construction projects, the implementation itself. So I agree completely.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to establish the why. You know, as Olfa, you mentioned at the beginning, you know, what's the point of all this? Because you are going to get to a point at some point in the process where, you know, you're below the line in terms of the investment is going to lead the return, you know, and it's going to look like, oh my God, what are we doing here? We're spending all this time and money doing this, and we haven't seen the results yet. So you've got to really be able to focus people on that goal and that why, you know, why we're doing it, and understanding, I think, and developing that story, as we were talking about earlier. Well, you know, we're really this is a fantastic discussion. I'm really enjoying it, and still picturing this beautiful. Actually, now the sun's starting to set over the Pacific, just in case you guys were wondering. Just envisioning that. But before we leave this organizational part of the discussion, I just want a really quick thought from each of you on the role of leadership, because we've talked a lot about, you know, working in project teams, and you know, I feel like, at least in my mind, we've been talking relatively, you know, managerial level or, you know, project level, you know, folks. But you know, what's the responsibility or the role that leadership, you know, plays in a successful implementation of either Lean Ipd or AWP? I mean, you know, and kind of interested in your perspectives on whether you're really, it's a bottom up approach, or, you know, is there also a top down element to it? And, I guess, you know, we would go with this format so far. So I'm gonna let Kelsey kind of, you know, lead off, and then Olfa, if you can, you know, respond.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's absolutely top down, and it's also absolutely bottom up. If it's going to really take hold, and you know, and I would say that for pretty much any sort of a change management initiative, if it's going to take hold, you've got to have executive support and buy-in. Absolutely. You know, they need to be advocating for the change, articulating the reasons why the change is going to bring value to the organization, and why we're on this mission. And then at the same time, you need that grassroots excitement, you know, from the bottom. You need both of them really for it to take hold. And so, you know, at the top level, usually what we will work with our clients to do is to put together kind of a roadmap. So whether we're starting with someone who's at that sort of management level, project management level, or whether it's even starting at the executive level in the organization, regardless, there needs to be some sort of a path. So, you know, we understand our why, we know we want to, you know, tackle this. And from there, you know, what's our path look like? What are the goals? What are the milestones? And then socialize that, you know, get that executive buy-in, get support, but then socialize it with the rest of the organization too. help to tell the story of the why and where we're going and what we hope to accomplish with this, and that it's not going to happen overnight. At the same time, you know, as that push from the top is to get the pull from the bottom. And so in Lean, we talk a lot about pull. And that pull from the bottom is really critical for this to be successful in an organization. So one of the best things that, you know, that a group can do who's trying to drive this process is to have those successful pilots and generate that excitement. So get a few under your belt, measure the results from those and socialize them. There's some internal marketing that goes along with this. Get other team members excited, you know, and very quickly you'll see as you begin to socialize those results and share some of that, you know, people will be coming to you and asking for help. They'll be saying, hey, can my project be a pilot? I've got this project coming up. I'd like to try this. You know, do we have some resources? Who can help? How do we get started? You know, what does that look like? And so getting, you know, that top level, really clear goal and plan is important, but then also just, you know, the excitement that you generate and the grassroots, I think is really what makes it take hold.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Olfa, talk to us about leadership as it relates to AWP.
I'll actually use an example. So there's this project, we're helping a pilot AWP for the first time. So it's in the petrochemical industry, site-based, self-managed. That means the owner is the CM, and then multiple contractors. The engineering is EP is done by an engineering company. So imagine this context. A year before the installation of a big piece of equipment inside for the project, right? While implementing AWP in the path of construction, we realized that the path of engineering, and these are the engineering work packages, and they're basically order and schedule. If the engineering team continues delivering at this pace, the EWPs, the engineering work packages, that specific major piece of equipment, which is a critical milestone in the construction, is going to be installed 3 months later. Like, we can't do it on time. Right. That kind of information is an issue, right? We have an issue right now on the project. We know through AWP that this issue happened, and we know about it a year before the installation date, right? Yeah. This kind of discussion, which impacts the contract, to actually ask the engineering team to put more resources, do more acceleration, and I'm an advocate for the role of engineering in AWP. They're the people that have to change the most to make AWP succeed, okay? So to make that discussion happen, that's a project sponsor or a project executive, VP of engineering in the other company level discussion, right? It's not a project engineer, lead engineer level of discussion, right? It's a contractual discussion. In addition, so there's staffing implications, and then another, consequence to that down the road is that, well, we might need actually extra support to be able to expedite for that specific piece of equipment. Well, expediting comes with a cost. That's a project business decision because it impacts the cost of the project, right? So this is just one example of how important leadership's understanding of the AWP implementation and what the AWP system brings, up as issues to leadership so that they can make decisions on trade-offs and, changes, staffing, all sorts of decisions that are business decisions. They do impact the business, the project and business objectives of the project. So what I wanted to say is that absolutely, as a matter of fact, for Concord, the company is growing. I'm very proud of that, but it's still a small company. So and the industry is big when it comes to AWP. So we need to choose who to work with. And I always say, like, we function like Ivy League type of universities. I already picked the great, great teams and great companies so that we increase our chance of succeeding, right? The same Ivy League universities, they pick great students, and of course they have great rates afterwards, right? Yeah. So one of the success factors for these great projects that have a greater chance of succeeding is projects where leadership is genuinely interested in AWP and what it means for them, through training, through the business discussion associated with it, and through the actual decisions and the implications of AWP in the implementation. And I would say, as a thought about the importance of leadership, nothing undermines change and undermines a company than having the leadership say something they don't do, right? That's really that I've seen it make projects fail. And so when I say for leadership, they have an important role: project management, project sponsor, project executive, lead engineers, leading procurement teams, project controls teams. Leadership have an important role to play, and then when they decide to actually implement AWP, they gotta follow on that what they say. And so I would say it is bottom up for sure, but without top down, it doesn't work. So
absolutely. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. So we're coming up towards the end here, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk about methodology, even though the focus is more on results. So quickly, from your perspectives, what are the primary principles or methodologies, of Lean Ipd and of AWP? So Kelsey, talk to us about Lean and the principal methodologies.
Yeah, so I love to ask this question to project teams when they're new to Lean and getting started with it, because it's kind of a trick question. The first thing that comes to people's minds is eliminating waste. When people think of Lean, they think of eliminating waste, and that's the answer that I get the most commonly. And yes, it's a key philosophy. It's important, but there are actually two main pillars of Lean. And again, this goes back to the whole Lean methodology, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's construction. There's two main pillars of Lean, and those are continuous improvement and respect for people. And going back to the previous question about leadership and whether it's top down or bottom up, Lean really encourages shared responsibility and shared leadership throughout the organization. So at every level, and we put a lot of focus on trusting the people who are doing the work to know how it should be done, to influence those decisions. And it's very important that we drive decision making at the lowest level, and that's one way that we create efficiency and eliminate waste. It's also really critical to engage project partners early. I think that's one of the most critical components of Lean Ipd, is that early collaborative planning. Those folks being able to provide the input into planning and design. And I've mentioned, bringing together diverse stakeholders several times, but there's a lot of intent behind that. That's not just to say, okay, we're all aligned and we agree, but it's actually to draw that knowledge from people who have spent years in the field doing that work and have that as an input when we're working with the engineering team, when we're having scoping conversations, when we're laying out the plan for the schedule, getting the information like Olfa just mentioned, where we're not going to get something on time, but we have a year to figure that out. We know far enough in advance that we can put in some extra effort and influence the outcomes. So, and I think ultimately, if I'm really thinking about, the primary principle of Lean Ipd or the philosophy there, I think it's results through people. That's, the phrase that I come back to. And then as for methodologies, there are dozens of tools and processes and probably hundreds. If you go to the Lean Construction Institute's website and look at the glossary, it's just pages and pages and pages. There's so many different tools that teams could use. And one of the first steps that I usually recommend for an organization who is looking at implementing Lean is to filter through some of that and pick a core set of practices to start with. I think 5 to 7 is kind of a sweet spot. And, it should be a mix of the more formal kind of tools, the, technology maybe, or things along those lines, and then also the softer stuff like we talked about that as an industry we tend to shy away from a little bit, but really does make the difference. So, generating alignment and collaboration. And so, if I think about organizations we've worked with, that core set usually includes like team culture and that early team building and alignment. Almost always, conditions of satisfaction. So being clear on what our goals are for this initiative or this effort, and getting the whole project team bought in and on board. And then, if I could pick one single tool that is, almost always used on Lean projects, I'd say it's Last Planner, which is, for those who aren't familiar, it's a collaborative tool for planning and scheduling the work, but then also managing production and ensuring more predictable results, and higher levels of productivity. And so none of that to say that, teams can't expand on that core set of practices, that, they shouldn't try new things, because that's absolutely encouraged. But I think just like starting small with pilot programs or pilot projects,
right.
It helps to start small with the tools and the approaches to allow for time for learning and change and training and providing that support, and then to grow and explore from there.
Great. And Olfa, go ahead and give us a little bit on the AWP methodologies, and then I think we've got a lot of great questions from the participants. So I'd like to see if we could maybe do this and then jump to one or two of those questions before we finish.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you guys know, I need hours to go through the AWP nice, but I'll try to keep it, to do it under 2 minutes. Challenge. I take the challenge. So, the very first part, thinking with the end in mind, and that's workface planning, and that's basically packaging the work in the field for your labor in installation work packages. And this is what tends to generally be compared to the last planner system, right? Do I use planning or LPS? And I keep telling people that's not the right question to ask, actually. Okay, so I'm not even gonna answer that, because that's not the right question to ask. If you're using the last planner system, you can, complete that process with some of the other components of workface planning. If you're using workface planning, you can use some of these good practices around the look ahead plan, all of the great continuous improvement related practices to make the process even better. But that's the workface planning part, and that's around construction. The advanced work packaging is a bigger piece. It includes that, but it's a bigger piece. And the early pieces of that are two primary things, fundamentals: construction-driven planning and construction-driven engineering. Construction-driven planning is the creation of a path of construction as a formal deliverable prior to the start of engineering. And construction-driven engineering is organizing your engineering deliverables, your BIM packages, your drawings, in a way that supports execution in the field. So these are the two principles and methodologies, actually, which are deliverable driven by, work package driven for AWP. And I would say, for these elements here, AWP is first and foremost a structure and a process for capital project and construction projects, especially for complex projects, so projects with a complexity that is higher than what, simple construction projects. On top of that, any methodology that enhances the better execution of that. So continuous improvement is not AWP, but it is something that we take from Lean as a, within the continuous improvement school, basically, so that we can enhance the implementation of the process of AWP. I hope I answered in less than 3 minutes.
That is fantastic. That is excellent. Well, I think we've got enough time here, and thank you to all the participants for all these questions. And maybe before we start answering them, I think that it would be great if we would commit to getting back to them, maybe in writing to answers, if that's okay with you guys. We can put our heads together and put the information back out to the group. So don't worry, your questions will be answered, even though we don't have time to do them all live today. But maybe really quickly, where do we go from here in terms of next steps? For those that are looking to engage with Lean Ipd or with AWP, and then maybe we'll probably have time for one question. I've got one kind of teed up here. But go ahead and Kelsey, go ahead and start, and then Olfa.
I'll try to keep it really quick. So, and I've mentioned lots of these things as we were talking through the other questions, so I'll just try to sequence them for you. One, establish your why, to Olfa's point, and as part of that, build out a roadmap, create that plan, document in writing, what you want to accomplish with Lean Ipd, detail out the milestones, the goals, take it to leadership, ask for support, socialize it within the organization, and then two, pick pilot projects, set criteria for which pilot, what would make a good pilot, what sort of projects are the right things to try this out on, create goals for those, measure the performance, document success and share it, learn from the things that didn't go as planned, do the continuous improvement part. And then I think just, talking to others that have been successful is a huge thing here. I think this is very true of the Lean Ipd community, and I think it probably is of the AWP community as well. But folks in this place they're really open to sharing. It's not about proprietary tools and practices. It's much more about, this is something that's really improving the industry, and we want more people to do it. We want to encourage others. I know that like when Procter & Gamble decided that they were going to start their Lean Ipd journey, they benchmarked with BMW and with Intel and Disney and other large owners. I've worked with EPCs and contractors who've done the same thing with their peers. And then last, use those internal platforms that you already have to spread word, to get feedback, to generate excitement. So like an easy first step, if you're interested, could be asking for some presentation time at an upcoming company meeting that's already happening. You've already got a lot of people gathering together for something. They're always looking for new topics. Ask for a block of time and start the conversation small.
Great. And what can you add to that, Olfa?
Well, that's great advice. I would add, so Einstein says assumptions are made and all assumptions are wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Invite everybody to not make assumptions about either Lean or AWP unless you're trained and you know what it's about. And so the very first thing, please get trained. I'll talk about AWP specifically because that's the trap, right? The name is so simple and self-explanatory. People think it's simple, then it's packaging. It's more than that. It's a standard methodology. And to be able, we've developed the certification and the training program, and we packaged it basically, in a way that follows the AWP implementation on a step-by-step process. It took us over a decade worth of experience to be able to make that happen, right? So I would say number one step is educate yourself, get trained, even before deciding to implement, or don't, just verify your assumptions. And I would invite them to do that. We don't do Lean, but all of the other resources on Lean, please, if you're interested in Lean, just do it, right? But if you're interested in AWP, Concord has committed itself, we've been doing this for years now, to publish a lot of free information. So if you go on the Concord Academy website or tconglobal.com, a lot of, we publish over 100, we have over 100 publications on AWP that all are open, free webinars about the fundamentals, the practices, the implementation scenarios. And if you're ready to actually get trained and certified, you may also do that. And I would say that's the first step. That's the first step. And the thing is, like, that's how you start talking implementation conversation with anybody, is to get rid of all the wrong assumptions around this. And I would actually add that it was when I started the company, and we hit some sort of okay, where is the industry going? So I had this great advice from mentors in the industry where we came together, we had an advisory board, and we were deciding, okay, how are we going to bring AWP to the industry in a commercial way, right? So not just, we have CII, that's great research, for the industry, it's amazing, but we're talking about actual implementation and results and producing knowledge and training and consulting and coaching for companies actually doing this. And Lean has a history of doing that. There is an entire market space about that, right? AWP is not. We're still in its infancy, business-wise, I would say. So we came together and we made a decision that the number one thing we believe in is empowerment, and empowerment comes through knowledge. And so that's why we decided to invest into, sharing a lot of knowledge freely with people. In the industry, and I like your comment, Kelsey, about things not being proprietary. Nobody owns AWP, nobody owns Lean management. In fact, if you say I own AWP, it's like you're saying I own project management. It's like, so these methodologies are meant to enhance and upgrade our global industry capability to deliver good projects for our people, our cities, energy, all sorts of facilities, right? So I would say use a lot of that free information, get trained at an individual practitioner level and at the company level, invest in that first, and then look at the implementation with Kelsey's advice around pilots and all sorts of things.
Fantastic. Well, we're over time here, and so I kind of feel like carrying this metaphor forward. I feel like I'm looking out of this room full of people who keep looking over their shoulders at this beautiful spread of appetizers and drinks that are laid out as the sun's going down. And I hate to keep you any longer, but are we good to answer at least one question? I kind of feel like we won't have done our job if we haven't answered at least one question. What do you guys think? We good with that? Okay, here's one. I'll make this the question. It says EPC has some legacy foundational elements that enables AWP, standardization for engineering, procurement, work packages, for example. Standardization is a fundamental for Lean. Perhaps this is a fundamental connection between Lean and AWP for general construction. What do you guys think about that? Sort of standardization as a bridge or as a connector with Lean and AWP. And I'm just gonna let either one of you jump in. I'm done, directing.
Go ahead, Olfa.
Okay. So I think that's a great comment. I'll be looking forward to seeing who made that comment. That's somebody that I think knows both systems.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, absolutely.
He's an average guy.
And here's the thing about standardization specifically. So standardization is like anything, right? You got to make a decision how much you're going to standardize. It's like how much you're going to automate, right? So at some point, it's like it doesn't make any sense, right? So what AWP brings is this ability to create a structure and from a standard standpoint. So at least the methodology, the approach is standardized and structured, right? Toward delivery, right? And I think inherently the idea of standardization by itself is it's basically meant to level the field, basically,
right,
between projects, between teams, between also locations, right? I mean, look at, for example, just simply training, right? We want, the way we did it within Concord, we did it virtual, self-paced, and follows the same baseline, basically. So we don't talk about the scenarios. It's really the baseline, what's standard across everybody. So when a project team in Singapore or in Cape Town or in Houston, all of them, they speak the same language. They have access to the same training. So they operate in a standard framework in their approach to capital projects. And I think that's the power of AWP specifically, is this ability to standardize the language, so the acronyms, the definitions, the process, and also
right,
standardize our view of this predictable project delivery. So our views of how do we look at projects overall? How do we think, all of us? How do we think about capital projects? I know Lean, obviously standardizing is one of the principles, and I'll let Kelsey talk about that. But I would say AWP, when we developed it, and the way I'm personally like really a firm believer, in this, is pushing for that standardization. We ended up applying a Lean principle, great, right? But but I guess that's one of the ways that connects both of them. And I'll finish with this comment generally. I think when it comes to the construction industry and our projects, as a community, we all should be conscious about that there is a lot of room for improvement. We're not doing that great, right? And so the debate around AWP versus Lean, I think, is a false debate. It doesn't make sense in the context where we're delivering project over budget and over time. We should try everything that's available and possible so that we can crack the recipe and figure out the recipe to deliver in predictable projects. And if that means AWP and Lean, I mean, that's great, right? I mean, that would be great. But I think it's going to be a combination of a number of things. And AWP could be a driver, but it's a combination of a number of factors so that we can find out that recipe for predictable project delivery. So I hope the industry moves forward with more of a synergies and an interaction between both methodologies.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think, yes, standardizing is definitely a principle of Lean. It's something, that we find creates efficiency, and I think of it across many factors. I mean, standardizing language, using common language, words that mean the same thing to everybody, and making sure that we're clear on definitions. Something as simple as that. But I think even more importantly is your point that, there is synergy here. There is, it's not one or the other. When we're trying to improve the way that our industry delivers capital projects, I think both of these things are very effective in doing that, and could be even more so partnered together. For me, and again, this goes back to how Continuum Advisory Group came into working with Lean, but I really see, that integrated team as the foundation. Those principles of whether it be integrated project delivery or, building an integrated team when, again, you don't have that contractual arrangement. Those principles and getting that early engagement and collaboration from all of the partners, hearing their voices and having their input into planning. And as you said, construction-driven planning, construction-driven design. I think that really is the foundation that makes all of the tools and processes and practices and the standardization even work. And so, I see that in the same way that I see that for Lean, I see it for AWP, and I see that they could definitely layer and have synergy together even more effectively than choosing one or the other and putting all your eggs in one basket.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you everyone for coming to this beautiful place for this great discussion today. And I'm just going to say I have optimism sitting here today. Those of you that are in the U.S., we've got Thanksgiving coming up this week, and I can at least, I think, envision a moment in the not too distant future when all of us might actually have the opportunity to be together and talk about how to advance our industry, whether it's through Lean Ipd or AWP or other methodologies. And I, for one, am really looking forward to those opportunities to see all of y'all. And thank you again for coming. And we will figure out a way to get all these questions answered as quickly as possible and get you your answers, because there were some really thoughtful questions here. So we don't want to leave any of those unanswered. So Kelsey or Olfa, any final thoughts for the group before we sign off?
I would encourage everybody to continue being engaged with all of the free information available. Concord Academy is looking to basically standardize the language and the training across on AWP. And by the way, you guys, I'm talking to you guys, but I think we should figure out some standard approaches to integrate in Lean, what is it within Lean that we could help enhance the AWP implementation from an implementation standpoint, and share that with the industry. And for sure, we'll get that this webinar published and get the questions answered as well. And we're in a great industry, so I love our industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, to everybody who joined today, and to those who are watching this later, for taking the time to do it. And again, we're excited to share it with the industry and share answers to, and even if you didn't have questions that came up while you were here in the chat, please feel free to reach out to us at any point. As you can tell, we love talking about these topics, so we're always happy to continue the conversation.
Great.
Thank you, Clark, for moderating the conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for giving me the easy job. You guys did a great job. Great work. All right. Thanks, y'all. Take care.